Okay, good.
I'm Jerry Dan.
Good. Okay. My name is Kevin Cabrera with the Santa Ana Public Library here in the History Room. Today is August 15th. It is 1:10 p.m. We are conducting an oral history for our Santa Ana Community Oral History Program. So today I'm here with, can you please state your name?
Jane Norgren.
Is that your full name? Full name? Full name?
Full name. Jane Reese Norgren, is that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry.
Can you give me your date of birth, Jane?
July 5th, 1935.
July 5th, 1935. Well, happy belated birthday. Your
Yes.
birthday just passed. Can you please state the society that you're with and your role in it?
I am president of the Old Courthouse Museum Society in Santa Ana, California. This was the museum from 1901 that was redone in about 1985, and a society formed to try to preserve some of what the museum had been.
And how long have you served as president of the Old Courthouse Museum?
I believe it is about 7 years now.
7 years? Can you tell me how you got started with the society?
J.J. Fries, who was a backbone, shall we say, in several historical societies in Orange County, and from a family that goes way back, was interested in expanding the organizations, and when I retired in 2001 from my teaching career, he really grabbed onto me and said, "Do I have work for you?" And so it began, starting first of all with the Historical Society, and then with the Museum Society. In the meantime, JJ became ill, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was grooming me for the presidency. And after that particular thing, he then got me into the Native Sons of the Golden West. So I have 3 different organizations that I'm connected with, thanks to JJ. He, in the meantime, has since died.
So can you state what you did as a career before you became president?
I was a teacher with the Anaheim Union High School District for almost 40 years, the last 25 as a high school teacher at Cypress High.
What made you decide to join this society?
I'm sorry?
What made you decide to join this?
Oh, I was looking for something to do after I retired, and my family had come to Orange County in 1888. So we had a lot of roots here, but no one had ever explored. And I am a history buff, and I thought, sounds like a perfect match for me.
Oh, very good. So what year did you become president of the society?
Oh, let's see, probably 2 years after, well, let's see, it was 2001, so probably 2004.
2004.
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me the mission of the Old Courthouse Museum Society?
Our society attempts to preserve the building, make sure that things are kept as they were, assuming that is feasible. We also are interested in putting on programs where we explore Orange County history, and we also put on shows such as art shows that demonstrate the artist's work, music, cultural events such as the Mendez group that has just been a family group that attempted to bring equality to education in Orange County. There really isn't much that we don't touch on if it is viable to put on a public group meeting. And we have the walls of the Old Courthouse room, one of the 2 rooms, that is at our disposal for demonstrating the art, the music, the public work that people have done. So we also give tours to children of the courthouse in order that they may understand the workings of our civic system in the county. We get elementary kids, and we get high school kids, we get college kids, and then we give tours to adults and business people and so forth who also want to know. Each tour, though, of course, is tailored to the level and interest of the people who are there. Thinking, we sometimes go out and try to get people interested in our work so that we can expand our horizons too.
Can you maybe talk about some of the past programs that the Old Society has, or the Old Courthouse has put together?
When I first joined, we were deep into the airfields of Orange County and all the plains. In fact, I thought I was going to go bonkers with all of these planes. It started, of course, Orange County has great history, way back the beginning of the 1900s. The young pilots who would come here and barnstorm on the weekends, and I knew about that from my family. My uncle would go off on the weekends and drive around and try to find an airfield where somebody was doing really wild and risky wing walking, as they call it. So when all of this really comes together, and then the war years, Amelia Earhart, Lindbergh, I mean, everybody was here, passing through at least. So we had quite a history. And the group that was in power at the courthouse had no trouble in getting speakers and pictures and movies, and it was a very active time, except that those of us who perhaps didn't put airfields and planes up at the top of our list got a little frustrated with it. So after several years, we started edging towards some other activities. One of our interesting early groups that came in had to do with the fossils in the fast lane. And it had to do with the freeways being put in the South County and the interior, and in the process of digging those freeways, they found all sorts of fossils of, not of dinosaurs, but of saber-toothed tigers and that kind of, more the same level, I would think, of animal life as that you would find at the Brea tar pits. So that proved to be very interesting. Then we had some artists come in to talk about, such as Joan Irvine and her collection at the Irvine Museum, how she got involved with plein air, California plein air art, and the collecting of it personally, the opening of that museum, and her book preparation with John Stern, her assistant writer. And we have worked with her, and she, of course, is probably the #1 person, and along with Mr. Stern, that understands the art of Orange County. She has given a lot of her personal art to the Irvine Museum, and it is a nonprofit over in Irvine, something everybody should see, I would say. Then we've had other museums, the Laguna Museum and so forth, that have sent speakers to talk to us about that. We have every year we have 3 luncheons, and we have speakers at those luncheons. And so this is when we get a chance to meet the public and inform them of what we're doing, although the museum is open every day that the courthouse is open. We have had a Indian basket show that is famous all over and is currently being shipped and sent to the Pequot Casino in Connecticut. They are going to finance its, I don't know whether they're going to give it a permanent home or at least a long-term home back there. You may not know, but the Pequots were some of the most abused Indians in the United States when our colonies were first formed. Terrible. Everything you've ever heard that ever happened to an Indian happened to those poor people. So anyhow, now that they've made money with the casino, they can do something positive in the world, and this this show that was, it was just knocked our socks off, quite literally, when it arrived. There was a tremendous amount of money behind it. I have learned that there are organizations, so I did not know this when I became president, that do nothing except put shows together. Sometimes it's because it's a popular thing in California to learn about a particular aspect of our life, our work, our arts. Sometimes it's something that someone brings to them as an idea. So we have been able to, thanks to the Historical Commission and Parks, OC Parks, we have been able to put on some very fine shows. There are museums that struggle to find a good show to put on, to even get a good speaker. Speakers sometimes demand fees. We recently had a speaker in which I believe the fee was $500. We thought it was worthwhile that we spend the money on that, but it's obvious that we couldn't do that every single time we had a luncheon. Some of our speakers just volunteer their time and say, oh, forget the fee, or send $100 to our favorite charity. But it is hard to get quality people, but we live in a state which up until now has been able to put together the monies that we need, and I haven't heard anything from the courthouse that says that we're not going to have a reasonable amount of money to continue our work. Our upcoming show is going to be Sandy Heaton's plein air work. She is an artist who works for OC Parks. She does things like decals and all the commercial art things that you could think somebody might do. But in addition, she also does what I call fine arts. She does portraiture, she does landscapes. They are not her personal property, they belong to the county, and they are used for in hallways, they are used in offices. I'm sure that down wherever the supervisors are, there's probably quite a bit of her work. I don't hang around the supervisors all that much, but that kind of thing. And she's going to come in, and the walls will be decorated with her artwork, and she will be telling us about how she does this. She doesn't have time to really do any artwork on her own. That's the sad part. Somebody said, well, why haven't we seen her at Laguna Festival, at the art festival? She's never had time to do personal art, to make a collection. I'm hoping when she retires that she'll have that opportunity. Now, after her, we're going to have the new director, Dr. Leap from Cal State Fullerton, talking about more of the fossils. We have just hired him from UC Berkeley, hired him away permanently to come to Cal State Fullerton and work on the fossils. And there are, well, when that first Fossils in the Fast Lane show left, all of those fossils were shoved into what I call Quonset huts, somewhere where the county keeps what it doesn't have out for the public, and have just been sitting there collecting dust. Well, Dr. Leap is going to be bringing those out, classifying them, and showing them to the public. We have a very, very nice collection that we can be proud of. So tough luck, Brea Targets. We're going to pass you by, maybe. We are thinking about having Gustavo Arellano as a speaker. That may rock some people's chairs a little bit. Gustavo can really sound off about things when he gets going, but I love him. He's does the column Ask a Mexican in the OC Weekly, and does some things for OC Magazine. So we hope that even though he's not particularly connected with any show, he nevertheless represents Orange County and Latino lifestyles here. He's a graduate of Anaheim High School, and very, very, and Cal State Fullerton. So, yeah, great guy. Now that's as far as our future goes at this point. We're not sure where we're going after that. But as you can see, we bounce around and do a lot of different things. There isn't, if somebody came to us tomorrow with a good idea and had some materials that we could utilize, we would probably be inspecting what it would take. most people don't know how much it costs to even frame a picture.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very careful about the monies on that. If you go to Aaron Brothers or Michaels, you see those ads in the Sunday paper for the half price off of frames. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about there. You go in thinking, oh, I have $200 here. I'll get this nice little oil painting framed up just beautifully. It's probably going to be well over $1,000 to have it framed.
Mm-hmm.
So you just can't run in and say, oh, I've got 15 pictures here. Let's get them framed.
Has there been one particular program that you've done in the past that has been your favorite? Or that you've connected the most with?
I think the Indian basket show was the best. In fact, just this last Saturday night, I went out to the Morongo Reservation to meet with Dr. Siva and his wife June. He's a USC graduate who is Morongo Indian, and they're working to try to save the language of the tribe, and they're having a terrible time.
Mm.
It's a very difficult language to learn. So this was a fundraiser last Saturday night, and I sat with 3 American Indian ladies, and none of us knew each other. We all thought, we looked across the table, oh, how many times have you been to this event? And we all said, we've never been here before. Well, we were all fast friends by the time the evening was over, and none of them were from the Morongo tribe, curiously enough. It was just, we were just there to support financially Dr. Siva's work in saving the language. I met a flutist, or as you probably know, the correct word there is flautist, Indian flautist, who, when he heard my granddaughter was interested in the flute, and she lives near Banny, asked if I could somehow get her to their meetings. This thing has just snowballed with me personally. They have made it feasible for me to be part of their group, even though I have only about 1/32 Indian blood in me, so I don't even know what tribe it is. So that to me, the Indian work. And I need to mention the News from Native California magazine that is partially responsible for that show. Malcolm Margolin out of Berkeley. Wonderful, wonderful man who got all of this started for the California Indians. They had no connection before. They were just sort of wandering around aimlessly, and all of a sudden they're hot stuff, the cultural world. Mm-hmm. You probably know that Phoebe Hearst of the Hearst family was an anthropologist along with Dr. Grover. This is in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Devoted her life to trying to preserve the anthropology of the California Indians. Isi, the famous Indian who wandered into a town in Northern California, and a book was written about him. A tragic story, because he died. They all died. Well, don't we all? But I mean, this was not a happy story. But then after that, even though a lot of money was left by the Hearst, the Hearst family was still utilizing this money for Indian culture. It wasn't very popular. And then along came Malcolm, a Jewish guy from back east, long beard, walking around the streets of Berkeley, really fitting into the Berkeley crowd, if you know what I mean. And he wrote a book on hiking in Berkeley or something like that. It somehow got onto the Indian thing, and it has just snowballed. And now there is this wonderful magazine, and he has encouraged people, all the Indian tribes of California, whether they're officially recognized tribes or not, to try to start saving their culture and working with it.
If someone wanted to become involved or be involved with the Courthouse Society, how would they go about doing so?
Just call the museum.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a copy of our newsletter, they can call me, or any of us are perfectly capable of telling we meet the third Wednesday of 3 times a year, and our monthly meetings, though, are based on the second Wednesday, and that is if you are have a board position. Now, we still have board positions open if your talent meets what we need, but we don't particularly need anybody else right now. I mean, we're okay with what we have. But if somebody came along and said, I've got this passion to do this thing, I've got a passion to organize oral histories, well, we'd probably say, hey, come down to the next meeting.
Now you just mentioned your newsletter. Can you speak about that and maybe what it's called and speak a little bit about the newsletter?
The newsletter discusses the upcoming speaker and the upcoming show. It also talks about, it probably will have an article on this oral histories that we're doing. We talk about the books that we do have. We talk about what's going on in the building itself. The building, with its Richardson architecture, is a work of art. It's not just a concrete building. I'm sorry, but if this building we're in right now were to disappear, I wouldn't cry. I would to me it's not great architecture. It's perfectly functional and a very nice piece of library. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's not like Frank Lloyd Wright did it, or that we have something here that has to be preserved for eternity. That courthouse of ours over there is really a work of art, and we would be very unhappy if anything happened to it. So that's I'm very interested in that. We'd be writing about things we talk about. We've been given money to keep the courthouse going. We don't personally do anything very often, but for instance, I found that one of the carpets was torn and nobody was paying any attention to it. So that bothered me as a housewife these days. I thought, I wouldn't let that happen to my own house. Okay. So off and away, and we're getting something done about it.
You mentioned Richardson architecture. Can you maybe describe that?
Richardson was an architect who designed a certain type of the arches, Romanesque, Richardson Romanesque, and so it has the Roman feel to it, and he did public buildings all over the United States. We were lucky enough to get him to do our building over there, but it was a popular style. I just recently ran into a very similar building in Key West, Florida. Turned the corner in Key West and I thought somehow I'd been transported back to downtown Santa Ana. I couldn't believe it. And it was their customs house from almost the same period of time. And my daughter and I parked and went in, and they have they've turned part of theirs into a museum too. They were having a wonderful art show on Caribbean art. So I talked to the gal who is the equivalent of Griselda, who is currently in charge of our work over here. And she just, it sounded like I was talking to Griselda because she had the same goals and the same things in mind.
I guess this is a good turning point. Can you give a brief history about the old courthouse?
Oh, well, okay. Mr. Spurgeon, who is the founder of Santa Ana, once he got out here and began realizing that this was going to be his life's work, wanting to have a town in Santa Ana. Now, there was a real conflict between Santa Ana and Anaheim. They both wanted to be the county seat, and it went back and forth. And it depends on who you believe as to how this all came about. I'm on the side of Mr. Spurgeon because my family was here. I'm sure if you went to Gustavo, who is an Anaheim person, he might have a different idea. But it was important that we get away. We were part of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And until 1889, now my people came here in 88, so they came when we were still part of Los Angeles. For my grandfather to register a property deed, he had to go take the train into Los Angeles and work there which is approximately where the city hall is, and get that, and then turn around at the end of the day and come back home again. It was expensive to have to spend the night in Los Angeles. Besides, he had the cows and the horses to take care of down on the ranch in El Toro where they were living. Mr. Spurgeon was aware that that was a typical situation. It was hard to get your business done and commute back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought a fairly good sized piece of land in what is downtown Santa Ana. I imagine we're sitting on it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he held that in abeyance with the idea that when we became independent, that we would build our first courthouse there. And sure enough, in 1887 or 8, we were able to break away, and by just before 1900, they decided to go ahead and build a building. And they had bids that was open, just things are very similar. They opened for bids, and Richardson's bid, with little pictures of what the courthouse was going to look like, met Spurgeon and his friends' ideas of what they wanted the courthouse, the courthouse to be. And so up it went, and it was finished in 1901. It was beautiful. I think practically everybody in the county came that day for it, and it was balloons and picnic, a huge, huge, hot buffet lunch served out of the basement. There was so much food and so many people that they were still eating at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon after starting to serve at 11. So everything was fine. They sent up somebody in a hot air balloon. It crashed. So we have to have a little tragedy there. You have to have a little reality come in. As soon as they moved in, it was too small. They were the bottom floor was supposed to be just a basement where you threw things. What do you do with this box? Oh, throw it in the basement. Well, no, the basement was almost immediately utilized for offices, and everything they had to deal with the school system. They had everything that happens, and you have. I don't know if you know how many. I don't think I know how many buildings in this area are actually city buildings. It'd be interesting to fly over sometime in a helicopter and have somebody point out, that's civic, that's civic, that's civic, that's state, that's federal. So we are a major municipal center for our government here. Now, everything moved on. There was a jail attached. There was a hall of records attached. And then eventually that moved out. The jail was not adequate. The hall of records had papers coming out the window. Doesn't government do that well? So paperwork. So the upstairs part of the courthouse had 2 courtrooms, and then the next floor down had smaller rooms, and today that has the wedding section, and which is very, very nice. I must say, people sort of cringe and go, "Oh, who would want to get married in the courthouse?" It's a very nice ceremony. Then after that, there are some assessors' offices in the building to this day, and it's done in beautiful oak. The architecture and the preservation of this, when the building was remodeled in the mid-1980s, they made sure that almost everything was saved. Now, the top floor, though, that had been the 2 courtrooms, the one that we use for a museum was preserved with all of the wood and everything very, very nice. We had trouble with air conditioning, but we've sort of gotten that under control now. The other room at the other end is an identical courtroom. And the seats were left in, the judge's bench was left in. And today that is used for more elaborate weddings or events. If you were, let's say you had belonged to a college group that was doing something and you wanted to have a formal meeting, very formal, you could rent that courtroom and people could come, and afterward they could have refreshments. And it just a very sha-sha sort of situation. So we have the building, as I said, pretty well, caught up. I'm just trying to think what the latest. We've just gotten the elevator repaired. Some kids had graffitied it. And, I'm sorry. I was blaming the younger generation for that, but we even know who they are, and they're not local. Say that. We had the building is used for movie shoots quite frequently. Tom Hanks, DiCaprio,
Hoover as well, right?
pardon?
Didn't they shoot a few scenes from Hoover?
Yes. The Hoover movie was there. Catch Me If You Can. Yes, and I'm trying to think, Clint Eastwood loves it. So they find it, they don't want to have to take their entire movie crew to Kansas City to find an old-looking courthouse. Kansas City would have one, but they can just come 40 miles down the freeway from Hollywood and they've got ours. And it looks like it's from 1890, 1880. You just clear all of the cars off the streets, shoot at night, and you're on your way. And the courthouse makes money. They make very nice money on renting it out.
So you said today the courthouse serves, there's a museum upstairs, and then what are the other floors again?
Okay, the museum upstairs, and then the room for the weddings. And of course the library that we've been talking about is upstairs too, yes. Then the next floor down, the assessor's courtrooms, they're small. And let's say, Kevin, that you have, your taxes have suddenly shot up and you want the assessor to reevaluate. You bring your lawyer in and you go, and they bring a judge in and they go over it, and then maybe they reduce your taxes or maybe they don't. So these rooms are not as well used. Evidently, people don't ever complain. You'd think everyone's always complaining about taxes, but they never go down and actually bring a court case against it. Now, that's on one end. And there's a display case, several display cases on the history of the building, and then all of the wedding offices, where you get your license, where you can have a simple ceremony. That is on the other end of the building. Down on the bottom floor, we have the archives, and this is pretty important. There is talk of eventually getting the archives into a separate building, but I don't see this happening. We have quite a bit of room. We could use more. But Chris Jepson, who's the assistant archivist, is content at this point. He's tickled that we've got what we have. Some people don't even have the amount of archive space. And you can go on a tour there. If you've never been, you should ask for a tour. What goes into a county archives? These old, huge books with all the edges brown and crumbling, silverfish running. Well, I don't think they permit silverfish to run. I think they keep the bugs pretty much under control. So that's in one section. Then the archaeology is a building, or not building, but area is on the other side of the courthouse, and it is used for reference. They store their things there. I'm not sure where they have their meetings. They too are somebody without a home, but somebody has given them. If back in those days, if you knew somebody who could give you permission to be there in perpetuity, you had it. You had it made in the shade. Let's see what else is downstairs. Oh, there's some storage. And then there's some other office there that I was never really sure what it was all about. Somebody had gotten permission to use some of the space down there. That, and then there's the attic, which is under the tower, the gazebo, the pergola, I guess is what I want to say, up on top, was removed after the Long Beach earthquake in '33, and it didn't fall down, but the supervisors were afraid that if we had another jolt like that '33 quake, it could come down and really do damage. And so it was taken down, and quite frankly, I think the building looks just fine without it. Perhaps because I'm more modern, it really did lend an old-fashioned feel to the building.
In your opinion, how has the old courthouse helped Santa Ana?
The old courthouse has helped Santa Ana in that it reminds us of the early founders' belief that we were going to be a very important county. That this was not just some cow town that was here with the train coming through to ship fruit out of here. And of course, you know, agriculture was what made this county function for up until probably World War II. This was agriculture from morning to night. So I think the fact that our founding fathers, even though they were farmers and ranchers, would invest in something like this, said that we were here to stay and we were here to be reckoned with as a viable part of the state of California.
When did the courthouse officially stop acting as a courthouse?
I would think it was, now I'm going to get stuck on that one because I think it was before '85. Well, when the new courthouse was built, and I don't know when that was. Could it be the '60s or '70s? I really don't know.
Huh. Something that we
Yeah,
can look up.
you didn't tell me to do my homework here. I didn't.
I think I'm good with questions. I'm good with questions. We have some of our volunteers. Just state your name, and then if you have any questions, just
Mario Limas, volunteer here in the Santa Ana Public Library. Yeah, one question I have is, in order to get married, do you have to pay in the old courthouse?
Do you have to pay?
Yes, any
Yes.
expenses?
Yes. I think it's $80. More than I thought. Because for people of my generation, it was very typically $5 or $10 to get a license, and depending on what state you were in or what town. And no, I recently asked that, and because I was writing an article for the newsletter, and I went, 80, whoa! But yeah. They make money on it. Don't kid yourself. The county looks for ways to make money.
I'm Jerry Lamb. I also volunteer. What would be your favorite experience as the president?
What would be my favorite
Experience?
speaker?
Experience.
Oh, experience. Oh, well, just recently the Mendez event, the night that the son spoke, or I guess it was the luncheon that he spoke, and then told us he'd never given a public speech before. Now, true, he'd been raised in this family in which this whole court scene had been, very important. He'd been hearing about it since he was in diapers, But the fact that he had never gotten up, and he was just a natural. I was so pleased for him, and I was also just so happy the way this turned out. My first teaching job was at Garfield High School in East Los Angeles. I taught 1 year there. I left a chunk of my heart there. I wouldn't want to work for LA City Schools for anything in the world, but it's not the kids that would keep me away. The kids were the most wonderful people that I had ever met. And as I say, I still get a little bit misty-eyed when I think about that wonderful year. So here we have another Latino situation. Garfield desperately needed help. I left to get married. You know, ever after, you know, every time I heard about LA, I'd go, oh, why aren't they doing something for those kids? Well, in this case with the Mendez thing, we got what we wanted because people got in there and fought for it. It wasn't the government that did it for them, it was the people themselves.
Hi, my name is Miguel, another volunteer. And my question is, like, do you think the old courthouse will keep preserving the history?
Yes. Yes, I believe that there are plenty of people. If my whole board were wiped out in an earthquake, there'd be the people there to take over. Yes. People really cherish that building. Drive by on a Tuesday night when the whole city is quiet at about 11 o'clock. The lights are on. Okay. Just stop across the street and just look at it. The old cannon down there in the front yard, saying, "We'll protect this building to the last." You know, it's going to last. It's going to stay.
Okay, Manuel Escamilla, archivist here in the Santa Ana History Room. First of all, thank you for stopping by and doing this. We really do appreciate your time. I just had a general question as far as, do you remember the first time you saw the courthouse and what that experience was like?
Well, evidently I've seen this building many times. My grandparents, after leaving El Toro, moved to 1470 Broadway. That address doesn't exist per se today. They've fiddled around with the street numbers. And it's now the only vacant lot. The house where we live is the only vacant lot on Broadway. So obviously in my lifetime, you know, Mom and I would be driving and Mom would say, "Oh, that's where our house was." And then one day, "Oh, that's where our house really was. It's been torn down this year." They tore everything down. It was a nice little house. It was too bad that they took it down. I'm waiting to see what happens to the vacant lot. So, in the process of coming down Broadway, there was always this big building, this big brick building, which I thought was some sort of government building. I thought it still functioned as a full court. I had no idea that it had been given up and turned into a museum. And when J.J. Freeze asked me to, I think he wanted me to pick him up one day. He was not feeling well and couldn't drive. He lived in Orange. "Oh, Jane, could you please stop by and pick me up and take me down to the meeting?" "Oh, well, okay," I said, "Fine, why not?" And when JJ spoke, you listened. And he started talking about where we were going, and I went, "You mean it's a museum?" And I walked in we always go in the back door. And there I am going, you know, like a little kid, my mouth open. Oh. So it just blew me away that I hadn't realized how important this building was. Eventually, when the family moved away from Santa Ana, the only reason we came here was to get awnings done for the backyard of the house at Laguna. Santa Ana Tent and Awning Company. And so I remember Santa Ana from that.
Well, thank you very much one more time, Jane, and we appreciate you coming down. And
Well, thank you for letting me share my feelings about the courthouse. Had I realized, I would have done a little homework last night on getting some more precise dates.
Oh,
And I'm sorry that I don't have those. But
no, it's all oral history is more emotion and kind of feel for
Okay.
the time. Yeah, and with that in mind, is there anything you would like to add?
is there anything?
No, well, just that I hope that the future generations will keep this going. The fact that we are trying with the Boy Scouts in our current project, we're having them write essays about the county, because we find our kids don't know anything about the county. And in fact, my fellow teachers who are active now have just asked me to put on a program for their meeting because I say things about the courthouse, I say things about Mr. Spurgeon. Who's he? Well, he's the founder of our town. You know. So it's really important that schools, for some reason, spend an awful lot of time talking about wars. How many times have we fought the Battle of Antietam from the Civil War, but nobody knows about Orange County history. We had some pretty good fights here, too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.